Hi, folks. We're down to our last 2 episodes in our Pitbull series with the amazing Dr. Sara Kelly, and in our following episode, the photographer Sophie Gammond. Don't forget that we are giving away a 5-pack of books, including Sophie Gammond's photographs in her book, Wet Dog. Go to thisispawprint.com/giveaway for more details. Thanks, and on to the show.
I see what I believe to be a dead dog carcass on the side of the highway. And as I'm driving by at 75 miles an hour, the head moves of this carcass. And I'm like, oh my gosh, it's alive.
This is Paw Print, an animal rescue community. Episode 73. I'm Harold Rhee.
And I'm Nancy Rhee. Today's guest is Dr. Sara Kelly.
Dr. Kelly is an emergency medicine physician who is taking a break from being a doctor to dedicate her life to the animals of Central Louisiana. She and a small group of dedicated volunteers run Central Louisiana, or CenLa Alliance for Animals. Hear about her incredible story on the front lines of animal rescue, as well as a story about Survivor, a pit bull that Dr. Kelly finds on the side of a road. If you want to learn more about Dr. Sara Kelly and CenLa Alliance for Animals, go to our show notes at thisispawprint.com/73. That's the number 73.
I'm an emergency medicine physician based in Alexandria, Louisiana. Kind of been all over the country and practiced numerous places, and followed my husband here, who's an orthopedic trauma surgeon, and we've been in the central portion of the state of Louisiana in Alexandria for about 9 years. It'll be 9 years this June. We came a few years after Katrina, relocated to this area, and realized there was an amazing need for individuals to become involved in animal rescue and lower cost spay-neuter programs, et cetera, in this area, just based on the massive mean income in our area is kind of a barrier for a lot of people to spay and neuter their pets. And obviously that results in numerous litters and overpopulation of puppies and kittens as well.
So before Louisiana, where did you live?
Well, I'm actually originally from Texas. I went to medical school in Iowa, and I've lived in Michigan, Oklahoma, Florida, and Louisiana.
Gotcha. So what made you and your husband decide to make this big change?
Well, that's a good question. It was a bit of a shock for both of us. We just did a bunch of interviews for my husband after he got out of an orthopedic trauma fellowship in Tampa, Florida. And he really wanted to be in a private practice with like a large kind of a community trauma center. And this just happened to be an area that had great need and worked out well for us.
So both of you are MDs, is that correct?
Actually, both DOs were doctors of osteopathic medicine, but yes, we are. He's a surgeon, an orthopedic trauma surgeon, and I'm an emergency medicine trained physician.
You're really trained for to be working on humans. Why this switch, though, or why this dedication to working with animals?
Well, I think it's, anybody who loves their animal realizes just this immense amount of unconditional love that an animal can give. And I think especially when you are in a high stress environment with your job, it's always nice to come home and have a sweet dog or cat or whatever your preference may be to, provide that unconditional love in your life. And it's wonderful. And I've always, as a child, I was always rescuing litters of kittens from the, stable where I kept my horse, and always finding puppies on the side of the road growing up in Texas. And I just said, that was something I put on hold for a very long time until I was a resident. And then I would work numerous hours at the hospital, and on my few hours off, I would actually help our community in Tulsa, Oklahoma by doing trap neuter release of feral cats. So that kind of got me back into the animal welfare, animal rescue component of my life. And once we got here to Louisiana, it just really kind of took off. I took over a nonprofit that was started in 1984, which was originally called Protective Animal Welfare Society. And we changed its name to CenLa Alliance for Animals in 2010 and merged with Humane Society of Central Louisiana a few years later. And that gave us a lower income spay-neuter program to assist families that make a pre-tax income of $40,000 or less. We assist them with lower cost spay, neuter, and rabies vaccinations. And it continued the animal welfare, abuse, neglect component to the nonprofit, which we always pursued. And then we now also work directly with our community kill shelter to save animals and improve the quality of life there. And pulling in the Humane Society of Central Louisiana gave us our connection to the East Coast adoptions that we do.
What would you say is the balance in your life as far as, your regular kind of day job versus what you do for the animals?
I had to take some time off, actually, from practicing medicine to continue to push this nonprofit forward. We are growing tremendously. The number of, last year we adopted out over 1,100 dogs, hundreds of cats, and we actually opened our own physical shelter structure last year, which we are in the process of improving upon and really getting that up and functional. And we're actually currently registered as a nonprofit in Rhode Island, as well as Connecticut, and working on becoming a nonprofit animal importer in Massachusetts. So we've just been extremely busy. And to continue to move in that direction without having paid staff, I decided to take a hiatus from medicine. So right now I also owned an urgent care. So I sold my urgent care and have kind of quit my medical directorship jobs and my job at the emergency department for now. Like I said, just a hiatus from doing all this and focusing solely on the dogs and cats and our family.
Gotcha. Well, people may be wondering, why is a Louisiana-based organization? Why do you have the various nonprofit statuses in the Northeast? Can you maybe explain that?
Sure, absolutely. Unfortunately, there's a very limited number of potential adoptive homes in our local community. Number one, because there's a surplus of animals, and number two, because a lot of people just can't afford the kind of care and regular veterinary maintenance that we expect out of our adopters. We do about 1% to 2% of our adoptions are actually done locally in our area. The rest are done, for the most part, in the Northeast. Obviously, due to the lack of spay-neuter enforcement, and that obviously primarily leads to the significant pet overpopulation problem. Something we're always striving to change. It's just the mentality of how to handle animal welfare and spay-neuter and things like that are quite behind the times in the state. I would say a good 10 to 15 years. So it's going to take some time to catch up to where most people on the East Coast and on the West Coast are. Because of the fact that you have very, very strict spay-neuter laws, and they are enforced, obviously you do not have a lot of backyard breeding programs. You don't have people with free-roaming animals that are breeding. So you have very few animals in your shelter system. Although I did find out recently you have more than I thought you did, which I hope people adopt locally first before they reach out to southern agencies. Just I want to make sure no animals in the Northeast are put down.
Sure.
Just to make room for southern dogs. But we've just found that the quality of adopters that we can recruit in the Northeast, they're amazing. They have more expendable income to take care of their animals, which is obviously what we like to see, so that the animals receive the proper vet care that they need and are in loving environments. In addition, because so many of these dogs, obviously for the East Coast, we're talking primarily about dogs. We can adopt out cats, but that's not very common. Come from such varied backgrounds. Many of them come from kill shelters. Like I said, some are found as strays, living in dumps, out of dumpsters. They don't typically have that nice upbringing that an animal have if you bought it from a breeder and you had it from 8 or 9 weeks of age and you were able to train it from day one. So we seek out homes where people understand that they're educated and they understand what they're getting into, that this dog is going to be the most amazing dog they've ever had, but it may take a little time to get there, and that they are willing to commit to doggy daycare for training, that they're willing to commit to some sort of, intense obedience program, and they have that expendable income to be able to provide those services to the animals. And unfortunately, very few individuals in our local community really have the financial resources to do that.
Thanks for sharing that. Now, you and I got connected through the author Peter Zheutlin. He wrote Rescue Road. Can you maybe explain in general for someone who's just listening to this for the first time, How the heck do you get the dogs and cats, or the dogs mainly, from Louisiana to, let's say, Rhode Island?
Sure, absolutely. Well, it's a pretty extensive process, as you probably can imagine. We obviously start all their vetting care and everything here in Louisiana, and once they're fully vaccinated, they've been treated for heartworms, they've been spayed, they've been neutered, etc. They're very healthy and have, the approval of the vet for transport. We utilize services such as Greg's company, Rescue Road Trips, which is mentioned, and it obviously is the basis for Peter's book.
Right.
We do use another company as well, and by a fellow named Kyle Peterson, called Pets LLC Transport, and we use one of those two commercial transports to pick up our dogs and drive them out east. Pretty labor intensive on our part, because we actually have to drive anywhere from an hour and a half to 3.5 hours just to meet a transport truck.
Wow.
So our dogs travel with us and then are dropped off for transport. And then, as you guys are probably all well aware, there's basically just stop-offs throughout the East Coast, and that's where the dogs are deposited to their, hopefully, forever home.
Right. So how many dogs, I don't know, let's say in a month or maybe in a year, I don't know, whatever's easier for you, how many dogs are you trying to send to the Northeast?
Well, last year we adopted out, like I mentioned, over 1,100 dogs, and the vast majority of those went to the East Coast. We would love to see that grow every year. It's very, I'm not going to lie, it's extremely difficult on our side. We don't have we have one occasional paid kennel helper, but other than that, this is all a 100% volunteer-driven process, and it's a 24/7 process. People are constantly, monitoring phone calls, taking care of shelter animals, going out trapping dogs that need assistance. It's just a continuous thing. So it's very difficult on our part. We would love to eventually receive the monies needed to expand this program, have more paid individuals, and we could definitely do, twice the volume that we do currently. But that's something, that will happen in the future. We're in an area of the country that doesn't receive a lot of public funding for spay-neuter programs or rescue programs. And even though if you come here to visit us, you'll see the immense need and demand as you drive down the road and there's packs of dogs running alongside the highway, that there's definitely the need for funding via grants and whatnot to areas like this. But larger companies tend to give those monies to more urban areas with larger populations. And unfortunately, we're considered more rural. And although our need is great, we kind of tend to be overlooked. So hopefully through private donations and our continued fundraising efforts, we can grow and and continue to expand our organization and develop an even larger facility that can accommodate the larger numbers that we would like to save.
1,100 dogs from an all-volunteer organization. Those are incredible numbers.
Thank you. We're very proud of that.
Yeah, absolutely. How do you find time for yourself? How do you prevent burnout? Or are you in the midst of burnout?
I think every day is a little bit of burnout, but then, you say the next little life, and that kind of gives you that renewed spark to keep on going. But it is a 24/7, constant preoccupation of the mind, and it's emotionally and physically draining. There's absolutely no question about it. I'm very fortunate to have a spouse that loves animals, and thank God loves me, because he puts up with a lot. So anyway, and my kids are huge animal lovers, but they too, I'm sure, would prefer that mommy was a little bit less involved in saving dogs.
Sure.
But anyway, we just we do what we do every day, and we just keep on trucking. I guess that's the way I'd like to describe it.
Yeah, sure becomes all-consuming. Well, you mentioned that you and your husband moved out to Louisiana after Hurricane Katrina. Could you maybe tell people what impact, as far as from your perspective, the huge impact that Hurricane Katrina had on not only the human population, but really the animal population in Louisiana?
Absolutely. Well, it was, as I'm sure everyone has witnessed on the media and obviously read about, it was just absolutely devastating for the whole southern portion of the state. We focus our eyes on New Orleans, obviously, because it's the big city and it has the most clout as far as what people look at, as far as the largest city and most popular city in the state. But the entire southern coastline was dramatically affected. People see pictures of individuals being taken out of their homes by boats because everything is flooded. And what most don't realize is that so many animals had to be left behind. So there were many organizations from all over the country that obviously came in to those areas, which was fantastic. I mean, the outpouring of support was amazing. But we still, to this day, have hundreds, if not thousands, of animals that were displaced from, the flooding from Katrina. And a friend of mine actually runs another nonprofit here in our area, and they still have dogs, 10 years, 11 years later, still have dogs in their shelter from Katrina that are just animals that, they just never could be rehomed. There was such an immense problem with, lack of spaying and neutering down in the southern parishes, just like in the rest of the state. It's just a very, very difficult thing to do when people don't have money and vet care is expensive. And there's also, like I said, in some cases it is a lack of education, but for the most part, I feel that it seems to be a financial thing. So anyway, these animals were all displaced, and we still continue to see, hear stories, see pictures of animals that, this far along, 10 plus years later, that are still looking for, permanent homes. And like I said, my friend Jillian runs another organization called Boudreaux's Animal Rescue Crew, BARK, in our area. And they have a couple pit bulls that they've had for years that were displaced by, from Katrina. And they just continue to care for them and provide them a forever sanctuary home because the likelihood is that they're really not adoptable dogs.
Yeah. Any sort of inspiring stories? It can be an animal. It can be a volunteer.
You want the happy stories or the sad stories?
Yeah. I mean,
yeah.
Well, yeah, go ahead.
No, I swear, I think I'm going to cry just thinking about this right now. Like I said, every day we come into these just really, it would just be so absolutely unfathomable for most people, the calls we get. Animals being thrown out of car moving vehicles, just caged in bags and dumps and thrown in dumpsters and everything else. But the worst, when I say the worst, it was also one of the most inspiring to me. I was actually traveling out of state, and I drove up Interstate 49, which is a main highway, basically north to south in the state. And I was rushing to an airport a couple hours north of me to take a flight out of the country because I had some business to take care of. And I saw what looked like an injured dog on the side of the highway. And I, turned around, even though I was running late for the airport, turned around, kind of tried to go back and find this dog, couldn't find it. 2 weeks later, on my return, we're in the midst of a huge hurricane that's coming in, and all these utility companies are driving south. The highways are just dead because of this extreme weather that's coming, except for all these massive numbers of, companies, like, power and light companies coming south to help in the southern part of the state with the damage expected from the storm. And I see what I believe to be a dead dog carcass on the side of the highway. And as I'm driving by, 75 miles an hour, the head moves of this carcass. And I'm like, oh my gosh, it's alive. So I drive another mile to a turnoff, turn back around, and I don't know, just for some reason decided to stop at a truck stop and grab some dog food, thinking perhaps, this animal was still salvageable. So I come back around and I pull up, and this nearly dead pit bull is lying there on the side of the highway on the shoulder, kind of nudging another dead dog. And I pull my vehicle up, knowing obviously all this stuff is ridiculous. You shouldn't be out trying to handle unvaccinated animals on the side of the highway. It's a very dangerous thing to do, but I had my rabies shot, so I always take my chances. Anyway, I pulled up and opened my window, and I called out to this, what I, hoped was still an alive dog. And he looked up at me with these incredible, brown, gentle, sweet eyes. And I just started talking to him, and he just kind of, it's just this amazing connection between myself and this animal. So I dumped some dog food out the window, just being cautious not to get too close. He's obviously injured. He's emaciated. He could become dangerous. I doubted it, but, I didn't want to take any chances. So he just started gumming up the food that I put there. And it's almost like it gave him this renewed spirit to survive. So to make a long story short, he had a traumatic amputation of one of his legs, which was a gangrenous, rotten stump. And he was completely emaciated. He weighed 22 pounds. And just to put it in perspective, he weighed 65 pounds a few months later. I mean, it was such a dramatic difference. So I called, there's no animal control in most of these areas. So I called the local sheriff's deputy, and poor guy is a 20-something-year-old fella, and he comes out and he's like, ma'am, I think we should he goes, I don't want to sound cold, but I think we should shoot this dog. He looks terrible. I said, I realize what you're saying, and I understand. If you could just help me pick up his, up his front end or his back end so that he literally doesn't break in half as we're trying to put him in my vehicle. And we just got him into my truck, and he lay there, and he put his head just on my console and laid there and just gently licked my fingers the entire, hour and a half back to my vet. And we saved this guy. We called him Survivor. And he made it almost to the end of his heartworm treatment and died of a pulmonary embolism. And it was like everyone was in love with this wonderful, wonderful dog. And he inspired us because he survived who knows how long on his own, on the side of the highway. And he had such incredible love given to him in the end of his life. And then to unfortunately die during heartworm treatment was just devastating for all of us. But we always think back on him. And every time we see an animal that is that destitute, we know there's still a chance of survival. So that's why we do what we do. And we continue to save puppies with parvo, save these, kind of dogs that most people would have given up on. And we just keep trudging through it. I mean, the crew that I work with, our board members, our volunteers, they're all, just incredibly dedicated people. Now, there's not very many of us, like I told you before, but all of whom have spent their years rescuing animals and are incredibly passionate people. And you read about some of them in the book that Peter wrote, Keri, Toth, and Greta Jones. And pretty much the three of us run our facility here in Louisiana. And they're obviously inspiring individuals just from the standpoint of what they've done for animals in this area for years as far as rescuing and rehabilitating. And then also, Keri's been involved extensively in trying to help to better the rights of animals in our area, which is a difficult task, just a different mentality about treating animals more as property rather than individuals. So that's difficult. All of us obviously have great, great stories about the different dogs and cats, for that matter, that we've rescued over the years.
If you could wave that magic wand, what would you do to change either animal rescue or just the state of animals overall?
Well, I think the biggest thing that we see in our area is just the lack, obviously, of spay-neuter ordinances. And then even if we did have them, would they or would they not be enforced? Obviously, many of the free-roaming animals are a result of pet overpopulation. So that's something that we are constantly working to change. And unfortunately, I think it will take time for that to happen. There are many people who just kind of have the philosophy that a dog should be allowed to roam. And unfortunately, like I said, in many of these cases, these animals are not altered, so they roam greater distances. They end up in the road. They end up getting hit. If I could mandate clearly that every dog would be in a fenced space, but a lot of this area is rural, and that's just not going to happen, unfortunately. You're talking about many smaller parishes, and we're in an area that doesn't have a lot of large metropolitan areas. So it is difficult, frustrating, all those things. But obviously the root of all of this is the spaying and neutering. I think that would eliminate the vast majority of what we see. For example, the dog I just happened to stop on the side of the road to assist has a harness on, so was probably tethered to something and belongs to someone, but had clearly never been near a busy road because he kept trying to enter traffic, which is sad, frustrating at the same time. But, if we could do anything to eliminate the overpopulation problem, I think would be the key. And then obviously implementing laws in addition to that. I mean, we hate to see dogs chained in the yard, dogs tethered in the yard. It's a terrible thing. But at the same time, that is something that people do around here. Basically, if they can't afford to fence their property, they tether their animal to keep their animal out of the highway, which obviously, like I said, I'm as an animal guardian, I'm not in agreement with doing something like that. But I suppose in their limited means, that helps to keep the animal safe.
Right.
Whether it's the right thing to do or not, I guess it depends on the scenario that you're in. But in this particular case, this dog should have been in some way contained, and he wouldn't be roaming on the highway.
If people want to reach out to you, if people want to donate, what's the best way to find you, whether it's a website, social media, a donation page?
Sure. We have lots of different options, and we certainly would greatly appreciate any donations because, like I mentioned before, the area that we live in, we're extremely limited as to the opportunities for grants because we are in such a small community. Even though the need is great, it's not seen by larger corporations as the best use of their funds. They can reach out to us on our website, which is www.CenLa, CenLa Animals.com. We are on Facebook, CenLa Alliance for Animals in Alexandria, Louisiana. We also have, you can donate obviously on PayPal, which you can access that through our website. And I believe we actually have another site set up. I think it's I believe it's called YouCare. Somebody else does that for me, and I can't remember exactly the name of the donation site. But again, all these things can be linked either from our Facebook page or from our website. And then they can always just mail us a check to CenLa Alliance for Animals at P.O. Box 8641, Alexandria, Louisiana, 71306. And we are a 501c3. And if anybody needs to look into it, our federal tax ID number is 72-100-8673. And we've been in good standing with the IRS since 1984.
Okay, you have an uncanny memory. I don't know anybody who remembers their tax ID, so that's amazing. That's amazing. Okay.
I think it's like when you were an undergrad and you had to memorize your Social Security number and
yeah,
for everything.
Exactly. Amazing. Ultimately, Sara, why do you do what you do?
Well, I think we kind of talked about it before. You have these wonderful, incredible creatures that give you unconditional love and are so incredibly resilient. I think of a dog that we recently rescued. Her name we named her Athena. She's a purebred Doberman. Came into our city shelter literally still having the chain attached to her neck that had kept her, basically in bondage, I guess you could say, for her entire life. She'd had multiple litters of puppies, and she comes in with her head hanging low in the shelter because she has this heavy collar around her neck with this chain still attached to it. We were able to save her, and, this dog is extremely emaciated and has been clearly abused by people. And yet at the same time now, it's been 3 or 4 months now, she is the sweetest, most affectionate animal. And it's almost as though in so many of these cases, they forget what they've been through, and their compassion for unconditional love is just so amazing. But I think, if you see that day in and day out, it's hard not to use that kind of as the fuel to keep you going.
Yeah.
And, we see that every day, these animals that are just scared and, initially may seem aggressive. And then once they're welcomed into a safe, loving environment, they just completely do a 180. And it's it's amazing to see that happen. I'd love to see that happen with people as well. Unfortunately, there seems to be so much emotional trauma that goes along with that just doesn't always happen with people. And it's nice to see that gratification rather quickly with animals. Keeps us going.
We want to say thank you to Dr. Sara Kelly for sharing her story and for truly giving her all to the animals in need in Central Louisiana. We also want to say thank you to Peter Zheutlin, author of Rescue Road, for connecting us with Dr. Kelly. If you want to learn more about CenLa Alliance for Animals or make a donation, go to our show notes at thisispawprint.com/73. If you'd like to nominate someone to be a future guest on Paw Print, you can email us at thisispawprint@gmail.com or go to our contact page, thisispawprint.com/contact. You can find me and Nancy on social media, Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. Look for This Is Paw Print, all one word. If you want to listen to more episodes of Paw Print, you can find us on your favorite podcast app like iTunes, SoundCloud, or Google Play Music. Make sure to hit subscribe to get the latest episodes immediately. We have one more episode left in our Pitbull series. Join us next time for photographer Sophie Gamond. She's well known for her Pitbull Flower Power series of photographs. We want to say thank you to all of you, our listeners out there, for sharing Paw Print with your friends and family. And remember, you spread a positive message of love and peace by saving an animal. Have a great day, everyone, and see you next time for another great episode on Paw Print.
Paw Print is a production of EVER Education.
You can't handle the truth.